Hello, everyone. Today I'm speaking with Borislav, affectionately known as Bobby Marinov, who has run the Exoskeleton Report news and information website since 2015. He has 15 years of corporate R&D and manufacturing experience and now dedicates his time exclusively to popularizing exoskeletons and wearable robotics technology. In addition, Bobby is a founding member of the ASTM International Exotechnology Center of Excellence, a member at large of ASTM Committee F48 on exoskeletons and exosuits, and recently became the marketing director for the Wearable Robotics Association. Welcome, Bobby. I'm looking forward to our time together here today.
Thanks for having me on, Josh. I'm looking forward to it too.
So you and I met during the beginnings of the ASTM F48 standardization effort, and I immediately loved your no-nonsense perspective on the industry. How did you get into this field? It seems like a side passion that became an all-in obsession.
Right, so my dad has done robotics his entire life. Even as a kid, I used to go to his company and I would be surrounded by robotics and automation. His specialty is fine motion control, especially for the manufacturing of semiconductor components and handling wafer chips and things like that. But I've always disliked the idea that with robotics and automation, we are removing the human from the loop. We are kind of dehumanizing work, so to speak. So I went into bioengineering. I've been keeping an eye on wearable robotics, exoskeletons and such, and they've gone through many names over the years. Biomechatronics was a popular name for many years. And I just didn't really believe that the technology is there yet. And then over time, gradually, while I was working in corporate, I came to realize that, hey, maybe this is really the time. As exoskeleton technology has gone through a few hype cycles in the past, and I thought about a decade ago that, yeah, now this is the time to get started, to get involved in this. So I started with trying to have a little sample of my thoughts and opinions on this technology, so a potential recruiter for an exoskeleton company can be able to see where my mind is. So you don't go into the process saying, hey, I'm really passionate about this, but you're going in, hey, I'm passionate about this, and here's the work that I have done already. Just something to show. And little by little, I understood that there's a lot more happening, but just people were not aware of it. And even though I've been keeping track of it, I was not aware of it either. So I thought that the hurdle that we are seeing isn't that there aren't enough engineers who are working on wearable robotics, exoskeletons, powered robotics. It is that investors, regulators, and potential customers and users don't know about it. They haven't heard about it. So from a capitalism point of view, this concept of getting the wheel to spin, more information and excitement on something, more people getting involved with it, more investment being poured into it, creating a positive cycle that begins to grow that field. So I pivoted hard from bioengineering and trying to make an exoskeleton of my own that will compete with other companies to what can I do to popularize this technology field, which I feel like has the potential to change lives. From my point of view, we've experienced a digital revolution where we've changed completely how we communicate with each other, even how we're doing this podcast right now. What could be unthinkable just 30 years ago. For those who are older, computer technology could only go pew, 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 pow, 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 when you have a sound card, and a sound card used to cost $400. Now you can run a podcast from your watch. So we've had a digital revolution, but a lot of the physical technology has remained the same over not just the decades, not just the centuries, but over the millennia. The wheelchair has been the wheelchair for thousands of years. The bicycle is 200-300 years old. So why not have a physical revolution where we change what we think of work, manual labor, aging, independent living, physical rehabilitation, combat duties or defense, construction, manufacturing. We have the technology. We are on the precipice of it. We just need to get a little bit more excitement, a little bit more investment, get that wheel spinning a little bit faster.
I love the mission to popularize the technology. I tell everyone I know about Exoskeleton report, but yeah, most of the people I know are engineers and innovators. Your pieces have been picked up by some pop news outlets, right?
I can see elements of it. So, English as a second language, my writing style is a little bit awkward to this day. So, sometimes I'll be reading a mass media article on exoskeleton technology, and there'll be a clunky paragraph or a few sentences in a row that are not quite exactly the same as the rest of the article, and I'll be like, what are they talking about? And then I'll be like, oh right. I see where this came from.
That's funny. Um, so, did I hear you correctly? Did you say you had started to perhaps develop an exoskeleton of your own at one point?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a huge Lego fanatic, and
Mm.
with Lego Technic, or just in general, once you learn how to build non-horizontally. So as a kid with Legos, we start building in horizontal layers. So we need gravity to push down on that construction or whatever the a kid's mind has imagined. Once you learn how to get away from that, where you can build something, throw it in the air, catch it, you can make anything. So with the at the time the Lego Robotics kit, you could link four controllers together for up to 12 motors. And then when you get the motors to be in a series next to each other, three at a time, you could get about 1.5 Newton meters of torque. So that is not enough for a real exoskeleton where we're looking at least 20, 30, but it is more than enough for you to feel the assistance and to be able to get the gist of exoskeleton technology. What is fit? What is comfort? What is back drivability? So one thing that I quickly understood, for example, was that a knee-only exoskeleton, that weight still has to go somewhere. Versus, so you think it's an easier build, but it ends up being more complicated versus a hip knee where the weight gets distributed over your belt and you have something to latch onto securely on the body. And then I was playing with hydraulics, I was playing with pneumatics for a little bit. I was playing with a material called PEEK, which we had in industry. It's like a self-lubricant plastic to make custom Bolden cables and see if I can secure them and put weight on them. So reverse it completely. The Australian defense team was working 11 or 12 years on a similar concept to that.
Wow, that's cool. Fellow Lego fan here, but my Legos were all spaceships. Uh, they killed off those robotic Lego systems, didn't they?
Yes, they did. That was the highest value, most sold Lego set for years. The Lego company since the 80s has worked on an introduction to engineering program. Then they got involved with MIT, which created the Mindstorm Lego NXT series. And the second generation was by far the best, which is what luckily ended up using, where the controllers can be linked together. You think, off the top of my head, without any customization, you could have up to 16 input sensors and 12 motors with Bluetooth compatibility, infrared, all kinds of other gimmicks. And then the following generation, the third generation, ended up sliding backwards and had less capability. And I think they just decided not to compete anymore against Arduino. So if we look at educational exoskeletons like the work by Volker and Oxivo, with the Edge Exo, the Edge Exo Pro, they have definitely moved in the direction of plastic molding, 3D printing, and Arduino controllers.
Interesting. I'm glad to hear someone's filling that void. I've met so many young roboticists who got their start with NXT.
I bet that it for at the time it was really the best, especially when you don't have a 3D printer at the time. You don't have anyone that has metalworking, woodworking capabilities. So to build frames, attachments, custom sliders, something that can fit to your body, Lego Technic was really good, especially the newest generation of Lego Technic where you don't have the studs on one end. So all the pieces are rounded and have rounded edges. Still not super comfortable to wear, but way easier than 1990s Lego Technic.
So, you're a full-time entrepreneur now, aren't you? Taking Exoskeleton Report to the next level. How's that going?
So it has its ups and downs. 2 years ago, I decided to stop being a weekend warrior and take the plunge and leave the corporate world and work on Exoskeleton Report full time. Initially, I was really focused on turning it into a technology group or some sort of a variation of what you could call a trade association, consortium, whatever you want to call it. It really doesn't matter. At the end of the day, the goal was to be a technology group where companies, regulators can come together, work on exoskeleton technology, get that wheel to spin faster without breaking any monopoly non-competition rules, obviously. And that hasn't worked out all that well. I think in the United States, we are just a little bit more competitive compared to other countries. And for one reason or another, now I'm pivoting to see if I can make it work more as a media company.
So, do you have a particular focus, or do you plan to cover the full wide spectrum of what's going on in the industry?
That is an excellent question. So I just started a Patreon literally over the weekend, and the first poll that I did was exactly that. Hey, if you'd like future Patreon subscribers and supporters, should Exoskeleton Report stay focused only on wearable robotics, powered robotics, things like that, or should it extend to the adjacent technologies? Because just like Industry 4.0, Industry 5.0, exoskeleton technology does not live in vacuum. You have 3D modeling, 3D simulations for the evaluation and the design. So both ends of the process from end to end, which really helps exoskeleton technology, that there's been improvements in those fields. It's now a lot easier to run a simulation or to do a design study than ever before. You have wearable sensors, which are becoming integrated not just in the powered devices, but also in the passive ones. We've seen companies like Ergosante attach a wearable sensor to their exosuit, even though it is completely passive. It measures how many times and how much the hypoelastic element has bent. So at the end of the day, it tells you the exosuit has helped you lift the equivalent of 3 elephants. So wearable sensors could be something. Artificial intelligence obviously is going everywhere. We have learned that every single person moves in a unique fashion. So there's a really good intersection point between artificial intelligence and wearable technology where the AI can hypothetically learn the uniqueness for each individual user and help create a better experience while utilizing wearable technology. And there's also cobots, there's augmented reality, getting more feedback of what the device is doing. So haptic feedback, artificial reality, augmented reality, all of these are overlapping technologies right now, which don't exist in vacuum. So it's a good question, and I don't have the answer for that. Because I think what makes Exoskeleton report unique is that it is focused on exotechnology, but maybe it will serve the community better if it starts covering some of these adjacent fields. So to be determined.
Yeah, interesting. And did you mention Patreon? Should we share the link with everyone?
Yeah, so that literally got created 2 days ago. I will have to email you that link. Yes,
Super.
thank you.
I look forward to subscribing.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
yeah, so I think about exoskeletons in the context of wearable robotics and robotics at large, where I feel like as robotics has become more commonplace, just using the word robot um, is kind of too generic now at this point. I mean, the technology can take so many shapes and forms. Um, I guess maybe we're not there yet with exoskeletons, but I certainly think we're getting there. I spend a lot of time thinking about prosthetics, for example, and there you really can't think about robotic prosthetics without thinking about the vast majority of other prosthetics, which are not robotic. One reason why I don't like the term wearable robotics. So, yeah, do you have a particular technology area that gets you most excited? Just curious. A personal passion, perhaps?
I think what makes me and the exoskeleton report unique is that I don't really have a particular application or technology that interests me the most. So when I go to a wearable robotics or an ergonomics conference, I look at everything, and I always joke with people that these type of conferences are made for me because I'm the only one that goes there, and I enjoy everything. I enjoy the medical side, I enjoy the military defense side, I enjoy the occupational, recreational. One time we've even seen the prototype of a powered exoskeleton for a pet, for a dog that is going through some leg joint trouble or rehabilitation. To me, it's all equally fun, equally interesting. I don't care if it's powered, I don't care if it's passive, I don't care if it uses AI or not. All I want to know is how can we get it into the hands of users. And
Yeah.
on a personal level, I have seen my grandparents age. I have seen their mobility decrease. I have seen, before they passed away, how their capability to sustain themselves, do independent living, go outside, had gradually deteriorated. And currently, with my grandmother, she has a triple bypass surgery. She loves going to the mountains, but she cannot do elevation. She cannot do an increase in elevation of even as much as 12 feet, which is like 2 or 3 floors. Because the next day she will have chest pains. So she will be able to do the climb, no problem. But then the next day she will pay for it. So what I need for her is an exoskeleton that I can have in a backpack, and when a trail goes upwards and the incline changes, I can put on her. It can be noisy, it can be slow, but it helps remove some of the energy needed, decrease the work on her heart, and get her up. And you would think intuitively, well, why don't you just park the car at the top of a mountain, walk down with her, and then take the car and pick her up? And the answer is, I've not been able to find a single trail anywhere, and we have mountains, where the entire trail goes down. Eventually, there'll be like this one section where it's going down, 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 and then it goes up for 2 or 3 floors. completely ruining the deal and making it unusable. So I think ultimately where exoskeleton technology excites me the most would be for senior citizens and independent living. In the United States, we don't have that many stairs. There's a lot of ramps, there's a lot of roofs, there's a lot of elevators. If you go back to Europe or other parts of the planet, there are stairs everywhere. We still have in Europe cities that are medieval cities that were built and designed 1,200 years ago, and they were started 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. Ramp accessibility and wheelchair accessibility was not top of mind at the time. So ultimately, long term, what excites me the most is exoskeletons as a form of transportation that does not require the typical infrastructure of bicycles, motorcycles, cars, or planes. You just put it on and you go and you move.
I think one of the beautiful things about working in this field is that everyone can relate to a loss of mobility, whether it's for themselves, through their families, friends, whatever. It will all impact us at some point, if by no other cause, through aging. So there's a universal appeal there, and certainly the potential for this technology to be much more popular than it is today. So thanks for helping to get us there. And I think it's just great that your focus is so broad. I think some of us need to specialize for sure, but I've really tried in my work to emphasize or leverage the potential synergies across application areas, across different kinds of technologies, because I think when you focus on the intersections between two different things, there's usually a 1 + 1 = 3 to be found.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's also been a question of much debate. Should the exoskeleton report focus only, let's say, on occupational and defense exoskeletons, or should it remain the way it is now, where it's looking at medical, both for medical professionals and rehabilitation, and for people who we don't expect to get better, so it's just a permanent assistive and compensation devices? Should that remain a broad overview? And I think yes, and I've had many discussions on that. I think that the similarities between the main applications of this technology and the hurdles far outweigh the differences, far outweigh the differences. The most extreme example that I can think of, there was an article of, I believe it was some lady that designed a single joint powered exoskeleton for her dog. And then she listed all of the problems that she had with getting the dog to use it, which was comfort, putting it on, having the controller be intuitive and make sense and actually understand what the pet was trying to do, and so on and so on. And then all you had to do was take that list, remove pet, dog, and fur from the language, and you could just apply that to a military, medical, or any type of exoskeleton out there, really highlighting the similarities, where we are seeing exactly the same issues and feedback over and over again, regardless of the application. And I think that as we are figuring it out, how to apply it in one field, those lessons will absolutely immediately apply to all other application fields. So, and we've seen this. We've seen so much progress. We've seen, if you think of some of the older devices that were mass produced. They were much heavier, much bulkier, and all of them through the whole spectrum has moved away from that, regardless of application. We've seen the reduction of claps and bands and fasteners from let's have this to be as secure as possible to how can we make this as easy as possible. We've seen the introduction of quick releases. Like let's say you have a medical emergency or you just don't want to waste time. Take it on and off because ultimately it's a wearable. So it's not a tool that you just let go. You like a backpack or a vest, you do need to take the time to take it off. So we've seen improvements in quick releases. We've seen magnetization, Velcros, and we've seen those improvements applied everywhere uniformly. So I think for the time being, I would like to look at all of it holistically and look at the synergies rather than focusing on the couple of differences here and there.
That's a very interesting perspective. If I distill down what we do at Humotech, I would say our focus is on optimizing the mechanics of assistive or powered joints. And this is certainly a universally applicable idea or aspect of exoskeleton technology that I think everyone needs. So I've focused on improving our tools for doing that. But you try and explain this to a layperson, and it can be a bit complicated. I imagine trying to explain quick release mechanisms or Velcro before those things were invented was perhaps challenging too.
Yeah, and we could take a shot at it right now. In the beginning, maybe 15 or 20 years ago, when I was looking at exotechnology, I think the big differentiator was power. How much power can the exoskeleton generate? Or we usually talk about it in terms of torque, which is how much rotational moment it can generate around the joint. But let's keep it simple. Let's call it power. And then if for anyone, be it a kid or an adult who is into car racing, it's the same way. You start with horsepower. You start with how big is my engine? How much vroom vroom can I generate? And then when you get into it, into the sport, you get into competitive driving, racing, or just watching it, you start to understand that just how much horsepower it can generate isn't enough, because you need to have a good transmission that can get that power to be at the right range where you need it. You need to have good engagement with the wheels. You need to have good air resistance. You need to have the ability to quickly refuel, to do maintenance. You need to look at the total weight of the vehicle. You need to look at your suspension, how you do corners and turns. So little by little, as you get into it, you start realizing that power is a good starting point, but then you need all the optimizations and you need to get that power to where and when you need it. And in my opinion, the same thing has happened with wearable robotics and the exoskeleton industry, where we started with power. These things are going to be passive? Are they going to be tethered? Are they going to be pneumatic? Are they going to be electric? How much can we generate and how quickly can we generate it and how much electricity can we pull out of the batteries? And then over time, the industry quickly started maturing, where it became, okay, we have the power. Where are we applying it? When are we applying it? Do we need to apply a different amount and different timing for every different user or different application? And then we get all of that correct, but is it comfortable to wear? How long does it take to put on? Is it matched to the right application? So I feel like there's a parallel, and what I believe that what you do is very much in vein of that exact type of work.
Yes, and I love your analogy. Car analogies always work for me. So the car analogy applied to our technology that I like to use is um, you know, thinking about the process of test driving different cars. And you can have all the stats in the world and watch all the videos and look at all the pictures, but until you really experience the car, you don't know whether or not you want to buy it. So I've been focused on realizing this pretty simple idea for wearable robotics. Right, you ought to be able to distill the function of the device down to a mathematical formula, and that formula I can program into our emulation system. In the case of a novel device, you're often reliant on, a formulaic description of what the device could be capable of doing. But with actual devices, real products out on the market, we've been focused on purchasing those products and then developing methods for testing them and empirically determining their function. And then we can also program that into the emulator. So this is something I would love to apply broadly across different technologies and application areas. But we've been pretty laser focused on the prescription of prosthetic feet and ankle foot orthotic devices for medical purposes, because focus is important. And we kind of have a track record there beginning from my PhD days in foot and ankle mechanisms.
It's interesting that you bring that up because I've had that exact experience. Right out of college, I had looked at all the metrics, was ready to buy a car. I had a cosigner. Everything checked out 10 out of 10. And I went for the test drive. And for the life of me, I couldn't get my legs to fit without getting knee pain. I spent infinite amount of time changing the seat in every possible configuration. And that was just a deal breaker. And I'm glad that I got to experience the vehicle, not just look at the numbers, which definitely checked out. But there was no way that I would be able to operate and drive that vehicle safely. And I always say that with exoskeleton technology, the best way to understand it is to put it on. That's why conferences and events where the devices are being taken, I think are so important. And we're seeing that, for example, with the Assistute Association in Japan. They're doing these traveling events where they rent a venue for 2 days in different cities in Japan, and it's free entrance for anyone who's interested to go and experience the devices for themselves and find out what the technology is all about. I think that is one way to go. At the Exotechnology Center of Excellence, Exogames recently, there were also exoskeletons that were brought for the students to try on and see what a commercial device feels like. And I was astonished to find out, talking to some of the teams, that even though they have designed their own devices for the competition, they had never worn or seen one that is currently on the market themselves. And to me, that was mind-blowing.
Yeah, in my sector, there's a related mind-blowing problem in the market, which is, prosthetic and orthotic technology is old, ancient even. And yet the people who require these devices very rarely have opportunities to try them before they're, fitted with one. And, this presents practical challenges for day-to-day care, but it also makes it nearly impossible to introduce highly innovative, more experimental new products into the market, because these opportunities for both patients and clinicians to try new things are super limited. So yeah, anything we can do to improve people's access to these experiences is super important, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, it's wearable technology. You have to wear it.
It seems simple. It's in the name. I haven't heard of this assist suit association. I'll need to investigate that some more. I think one of the great things you've done is taken a really global focus and put it in front of all of us R&D, innovator folks who may not otherwise have the time or the access to explore some of these other markets. Especially, I find the Asian technology developments hard to keep track of. So anytime you do an article on a more global issue, I always read those.
Yeah, it's an excellent point, and the same thing happened to me when I was in corporate. When I moved to pure research and development, I was confident that I will have more time to look at what's happening around the world, but it ended up being exactly the opposite. In research and development, you have to run your own experiments, you have to run your own data analysis, you have to come up with your own conclusions, you have your own problems to solve, rather than researchers having time to look at everything that's happening. I became more hyper-focused on just what I'm doing and the problems that are directly in front of me. So I know from experience that there's this counterintuitive phenomenon. The more we specialize in something, the more it can become difficult to keep track of what's happening in the rest of the world. And 10 years ago, that was where I was with exoskeleton technology, where I had just not realized how much was happening globally. And to this day, we continue to use slightly different terminology to mean the same thing. And it can sometimes be difficult to even detect what's happening. So I know that this is an important thing because we don't have the time to keep track of things that are happening on the other side of the planet that are in a different language. Going back to artificial intelligence, at least translating written material has become a lot easier. And having worked on different committees where we attract people from different continents, different countries, it's always interesting to me how there's a cultural bias and a cultural perspective to the different geographical regions. So the same problem will be approached differently. And when you try to reach consensus, that could be challenging. When you're trying to solve a problem, that could be really advantageous. Because now you have different points of views and that same problem is being tackled in completely different ways.
Have you had good luck with attracting readers from around the globe to Exoskeleton Report, or is it predominantly a U.S. kind of readership?
The main language barrier is also the geographical barrier. It's in English. I don't do translation or auto translations in other languages. So for regions, for some regions, that's definitely a difficulty. So the good chunk of the readership is North America based, and that is definitely the focal point, but it's still less than 30% of the total.
Oh,
So
wow.
another way to look at who are the readers that are being attracted is financial capability. The countries that have more money to spend on this type of technology typically where the readers are coming from. And there has always been this financial barrier to wearable technology, and there's usually a financial barrier to new technology. Even if you look at something simple as robotic vacuum cleaners, they used to be really expensive. Like getting a laser system used to be $300 just for the module, and the price of those has gone down dramatically as the numbers of units that are in exploitation has increased dramatically. So we've seen scale manufacturing really benefit some robotic applications. We haven't seen that, in my opinion, yet with wearables. So what ends up happening is there's a financial barrier, which to me, and this is purely conversational, is really unfortunate, because that means that a country that doesn't necessarily have a good safety net for its workers. So we'll just pick one example. We'll pick occupational exoskeletons that are trying to reduce the risk of musculoskeletal injury. So basically make it less likely that if you have a physically demanding job, you will get injured. Countries that don't have as good of a safety net and don't, on average, really have the capability to take care of injured workers, are also the same countries that have less access and visibility to emerging technologies like exoskeletons. So even though those people would be able to benefit the most out of an occupational exoskeleton, because they definitely need to stay healthy and provide for their family, and they will struggle with getting physical rehabilitation or medical compensation, they are also the ones that have the least access to it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. We see that play out in other industries. I don't know, a random example that comes to mind is telecommunications. The reliance on cellular networks in, lesser developed countries is absolutely essential for communication and competition in global markets. We need more developers focused on serving these markets. But I guess in a world driven by profit, maybe these business models are harder to validate.
Yeah, absolutely. And without getting too much into it, it touches upon a few topics that are still a complete mystery to me. Going back to our example of occupational exoskeletons, should that be something that's mandated, or is that optional? So how many people would actually wear these safety glasses if they were not mandatory for construction sites? Like when I went to do university organic chemistry, we had 1 week on safety training. And then if you don't wear your safety equipment at any time, you are out of the class with a failed grade. You're done. Fail, bye, goodbye. We don't want to hear. So should this be mandatory, or should this be optional? Is there a social responsibility to make this technology accessible, or should this be purely profit-driven? Should governments get involved with subsidies or even outright buy devices, or invest money in making this technology more accessible to their citizens, or should they stay out of it? There's infinite examples through history of different fields emerging and following different pathways.
Yeah, and we live in this interesting economy where the government invests heavily in the creation of new technologies, but the translation of those technologies into the real world is often seen as a problem for private businesses.
Mm-hmm.
Creating the valley of death, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have seen that with exoskeleton technology, maybe not so much on governments getting involved with the initial creation of the technology, but definitely this gap of the application of it. So I've been in discussions where it's like, well, an exoskeleton you should be able to take out of the box and put it on and use it. And I go, wait a second, stop. As a manufacturing engineer with years of experience in corporate, I would never introduce a tool, device, or whatever it is without training on the manufacturing floor. That is just a recipe for disaster.
So I wanted to ask, going back to the thinking about different global markets, have you seen advantages to how this plays out in other countries, outside of the U.S.? I've noticed there seems to be perhaps a higher level of cooperation between small companies, large companies, and governments in Europe, for example, comparing to the U.S.
Yeah, I have exactly the same experience. So at the end of last year, I was fortunate to be able to do a 2-week trip through Germany and Switzerland and focus on exoskeleton technology. And what I saw was really surprising to me. The amount of collaboration, the amount of communication between government and private entities, universities working with companies working with potential customers, evaluators. It's like going to a different planet. It was so different from the hyper competitiveness that I have seen most of my life in North America. At least the US is closer to East Europe in terms of mentality than West Europe. In countries like Japan, there they have a sharp demographic decline with fewer and fewer younger employees. And also, at least in Japan's case, they are proud to be a leader in robotics technology. So they have invested in both the development and application of exotechnology. So I would say yes, there's definitely a divergence on what's happening in West Europe, countries like Germany, France, Switzerland, on the other side of the continent in Japan. And now I think the next frontier is East Europe, where I'm seeing more and more distributors of this technology pop up in countries like Romania, Greece, Bulgaria. So we'll see what happens there. We'll see if there's a model that works.
You specifically said distributors, not developers, correct?
Right. What I'm seeing happening around the globe is that the producers of the exoskeleton technology are becoming less and less involved with its application, implementation, and sales. And they're starting to rely more heavily and work more extensively with distributors. So I'm seeing roughly almost now a 1-to-1 ratio of having as many distributors of exoskeleton technology as they are producers. And there's still only a handful of them in North America. This is primarily happening from what I can see in, again, Japan and West Europe. And we've seen that with other technologies, like automation, for example. You do not go directly to the producer of the automation solution. You go to what's called an implementer, which is not just a distributor, but is someone that will go on site, evaluate the needs and what you and your company are trying to solve. Then they will come up with different packages, which usually involve a combination of different producers. You choose which one you want to go with, and then they help you with building that, implementing, training, maintenance, and end-of-life obsolescence. So an integrator stays with the project through the duration of the project. The distributor is like, well, here's your safety glasses. Thank you for buying them from us. Have fun. Good luck using them. So I'm seeing a combination of both. Personally, I believe that we are going to end up seeing a model of implementers who are professional outfits that work with multiple producers. They know how to repair, they know how to communicate to the appropriate stakeholders on what is the return on investment on their purchase. They know how to talk to the people on how to train them, how to think about this stuff, how to do a custody chain, who's responsible for maintenance, who's responsible for checking on the condition of the devices, things like that. And but that's simply just an opinion on my end. I have no way to back it up. We may end up with just a pure distributor model. We may end up with something like a car dealership model where you go and you get to try out the devices or use an emulator to see how the different devices would feel. Or we may end up just sticking to the individual producers having departments that handle that. But at least for Japan and West Europe right now, I'm seeing an explosion of outfits that are handling exoskeleton resale and application at the customer site.
This is fascinating and seems to me like a sign of maturity. There are now enough products and buyers that such middleman type of organizations have significant value to provide. I have to imagine the ideal model will probably depend on the sector that we're talking about. Medical is going to be different than occupational, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that because of it, we can definitively say that we have market creation and market maturation when we see dedicated repair outfits. So that's a company that's on wheels and they know how to repair medical, occupational, defense exoskeletons, and they take that burden away from the individual producers. And they are trained on how to deal with any and all devices that are on the market. I think when we see that, that's when we know for sure, okay, we have reached the next level of market maturation.
Fascinating. Are you seeing these primarily as sort of local specialists, or are you also seeing online retailers that maybe distribute more widely?
I think we're starting to see both. I think there's an advantage to having the local who've already been working potentially for decades with local businesses on other industry 4.0, 5.0 technology. Same thing with the recreational side. We've seen for many years now some local ski shops have recreational consumer exoskeletons that help alleviate your knees while you're skiing, and they will carry those type of devices. And these are just examples. These are just random examples to show the variety of things that we have there. I've seen now some medical distributors of medical technology start to experiment with carrying wearable tech as well. So time will tell. This is all as it's happening.
Fascinating. So I'll be interested to see as Exoskeleton report perhaps transitions into a subscriber type of model, how your readership evolves and sort of how that motivates the evolution of your focus. Is that explicitly part of your plan? Like, do you have ways for people to kind of get in touch with you and share their thoughts about exoskeletons?
Yeah, absolutely. So right now at the bottom of the
Mm.
website, there's the contact us that I get to see all of those messages for for Patreon users. Depending on the tier, you will be able to get a hold of me. I'm planning to have meetings as well to get in touch, hear people's thoughts. I'm always open to suggestions and ideas, subject to the limitational capabilities of resources.
Mm. Super cool. Are you thinking of like a monthly or quarterly, I don't know, ask me anything type of sessions?
Yeah, precisely. I think that will be a good start, and then see how it goes from there. But
I look
people have
forward to
not been
that.
shy to also send direct emails. It will all have to be worked. But I think moving forward, having a regularly scheduled monthly Ask Me Anything meeting for Patreon subscribers is definitely going to be the way forward.
Um, Now you're getting me excited. Um, are you are you thinking at all about uh, maybe this is too old school of me, but I'm thinking about like a traditional forum type of environment, maybe like a Reddit or a
Mhm.
Discord, where the community can actively discuss with each other online.
Right. So I've tried that. I've had a forum that was operational for a while. I've had a Discord. Also, some other entities have tried doing LinkedIn groups. And I think that what I'm noticing is that when it's a public space discussion, um, the producers do not feel comfortable um, communicating, talking, and typically that's really the place for a conference where you have those hallway conversations. I always say that when you go to a conference, the real value that you get is from the hallway conversations. Um, so it would have to be some sort of a more structured, more private environment.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there are certainly things I would say in the hallway at a conference that I wouldn't put online. And maybe this is just a romantic notion of mine, but um, I do think some kind of online community would be attractive. I don't know what it looks like, but we have some really good discussions online, mostly through Slack, with our Humotech community. So, like, people who have purchased products from us, and it sort of blurs the lines of technical support, and you know, might this be possible, or what do you think about this trend in the industry? Um, so anyway, that's the angle I'm coming at it from, and I feel like that's been really good for us, and I somehow want to encourage more of it. Slack is not a great platform for this because it's gated, and not everybody likes the interface. So I don't know, hard problem to solve, but something I'd participate in if I knew about
Yeah, no, definitely. That's great feedback. I think Patreon just introduced a global chat and a
it.
subscribers only chat, so it's somewhat similar. Plus, they have the ability to set up an event and a call that you announce in advance, just like we talked about.
Right.
You're doing this podcast. The Exoskeleton Report has started a podcast. So obviously, I'm hoping to see more engagement there with people asking questions directly. And I think for the time being, at least for the last year and a half, LinkedIn has really become that intermediary space where it's still too public, but it's also the one place where I see the most questions and the most discussions take place. But LinkedIn being LinkedIn, unfortunately, they're not 100% pure discussions. Everyone is still representing their companies and entities.
Yeah.
So it is a discussion, but also from an incredibly narrow point of view.
Yeah, we all tend to self-promote on platforms like that. We want to look good.
Right, and everyone feels an obligation to do that when it's a more public environment. You don't want to even ask a question that might resemble that you're not the top specialist in the universe and you don't have all the answers already figured out. That is not conducive to having to moving the needle forward, to improving a technology. If you can't even feel comfortable to discuss shortcomings and hiccups and hurdles.
Well, this is why the pub down the street will always be in business. Sometimes that's the best way. Well, Bobby, thank you. The hour has flown. I'm glad you mentioned your podcast because I want to give a shout out to the new Exoskeleton work podcast as well. I just interviewed Tom Sugar, who is also on your podcast. So look at us. We're building community.
We're building communities. We're trying to get the conversation going because this is all that these are. These are conversations. It's not an online class.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I like to end with a call to action, and the first call to action is I really think you ought to come visit Pittsburgh one of these days. You seem like you travel a lot. Maybe you can do a layover here. But for listeners, I'm curious for your perspective as a storyteller with a global audience. What kinds of content are you looking for more of from developers?
Right now, without a shadow of a doubt, user stories and user experiences that do not feel like they've been sanitized by the producer of the solution or the technology, where it's like, oh, this is great, this is phenomenal. It's like, oh, let's hear some of the bad things and some of the challenges too. Let's humanize it a little bit. So you can say that exoskeleton technology has been around, at least conceptually as an idea, for more than 120 years. And now in the last decade, we have seen really an explosion of how many units are out there being used. So it's logical that at this point we should be hearing stories and we should be hearing what is this doing? And they should be making it into the public domain, because I get to hear a lot of stories, but they're not officially on the record. Mm-hmm. And I don't always get the full picture. So that will be the one thing that I think that helps, especially in the United States and North America. A lot of decisions by decision makers are made based on the story that is attached to them, not so much numbers, pure numbers. There needs to be a story. How did this make someone's life better? How did this prevent an injury? How did this give the ability for someone to do something they haven't been able to do for years? How did this lead to someone's promotion? How did this lead to cost saving? So I see other technologies like augmented reality, where they come up with these almost case studies, where from A to Z they explain. It's like, well, we had this building, we had to do the piping, and then with augmented technology, we could have the inspectors walk the corridors and they could virtually see what is behind panels and walls and could fix problems before they became real problems. And we've saved $10 million on the project.
Oh, wow. I love this answer. I think this is a great insight. And at Humotech, we're actually working on what I think will be a response to this call to action. So I'm excited to see what you think. I can echo what you said. We, as developers, love to hear that people think our product's cool. But if we don't get feedback about the limitations, then we can't make it better. And clearly, it needs to get better if it's going to be ubiquitous someday. So, great note to end on. Thank you, Bobby, so much.
Thank you for your time. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. All right, bye.